Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of The Conscious Capitalists with myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Sisodia. Hey there, Raj.
Hello, Timothy. I'm in the great Pacific Northwest today in a beautiful setting in Eugene, Oregon. Good to see you.
Oh, lovely. Well, we have Brieane Olson, who's in Boston today in a hotel room, and I'm in a hotel room in Dallas. So we're all spread out somewhere in the world. And we're really excited to have Bree join us today. Among other things, she's a new member of the board at Conscious Capitalism. She's also the chief executive officer of PacSun and the author of a book that's just come out called Co-Created, the Culture Strategy That Redefined PacSun. She has more than 2 decades at the company. She's led a transformational brand reset and moved PacSun from a legacy retailer to a digital-first, purpose-driven culture force for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Let me say it again. She has led a transformational brand reset, moving PacSun from a legacy retailer to a digital-first, purpose-driven culture force for Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and we'll spend some time talking about how she did that. Her leadership's defined by an outside-in approach to customer centricity and a deep commitment to social responsibility, mental health advocacy, and community-level change. She's a graduate of the Harvard Business School's Advanced Management Program and an ambassador for Conscious Capitalism and a member of our board. Bree, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you both so much for having me on this morning. It's a real pleasure.
Bree, you're one of the leaders that I really admire in our system. And we'll talk about why that is in many ways as we get in to our podcast. But maybe begin with explaining to our audience PacSun, because if you're not a Gen Alpha or a Gen Z person, you may not be as aware as you need to be of PacSun. So maybe introduce us.
Sure, absolutely. PacSun's mission and purpose is to inspire the next generation of youth. And we do that by building community at the intersection of 4 pillars: music, fashion, art, and sport. And we strive to make the world a better place by connecting with youth in meaningful ways. And so we are a lifestyle brand, and we have spent the last decade transforming ourselves from a legacy retailer to a brand itself. And so very proud of our team and the work that we have collectively done. I have been in the CEO role just shy of 3 years now, and really enjoying the opportunity to lead our team through this transformation. And as you mentioned, I'm here in Boston and really excited to be here this morning with the two of you.
Well, you're there in Boston, but let's let a little secret out. You're there in Boston because Harvard Business School just released a case study of PacSun, and your book just came out. So yesterday you were teaching a class at Harvard Business School. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's a real full circle moment for myself personally. And I also think a beginning chapter for our brand. I had the good fortune of being part of the AMP program at Harvard Business School, which is part of their executive education program in 2019. And so to be back in 2026 with one of the professors that I admired the most, Professor Cynthia Montgomery, who studies strategy, to be with her and to have the PacSun co-creation case presented to AMP 210 was really quite extraordinary. So I had the real privilege to be able to be in the classroom while the class was being taught. The book Co-Created, which debuts on May 12th, was gifted to all 200 students the evening before. And there were quite a few students who spent the evening reading the book and had a lot of fantastic feedback for me. The class was super insightful. And what I think was more important than the moment was the fact that PacSun's youth-centered model of co-creation is now being taught as a strategy for all brands and all industries moving forward. And I think that pivot is what underscores the importance of what yesterday was really about. And I'm very eager to see both the case and the book scale in terms of audience and reach, and having it reach students and faculty, I think is so incredibly important for the future and for our purpose.
Well, you used a phrase that I think is an important one. You co-created the brand and the community. And you use those phrases together, co-creating the brand and the community, because you're co-creating with the community what the brand stands for. And this is breakthrough thinking, Bree. And more than breakthrough thinking, you're practicing it, you're doing it. So tell us a little bit about what that journey to this idea of co-creating, where did it come from? How did it evolve?
Yeah. So, as I discuss in the book, it's been a transformation that has taken our brand over a decade. And we really started with collaborations, and our collaborations with the likes of Kendall and Kylie Jenner or Jerry Lorenzo with Fear of God Essentials. And what is now today with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Formula One, Selena Gomez, and the Rare Denim Edit has been a real evolution and shift into the power of co-creation, which really requires an internal transformation first. So as you spoke about, it's the inside first to then be able to bring the external partners and stakeholders and shareholders in. And as conscious capitalism discusses, really redefining stakeholder centricity and being defined with a clear vision and purpose were some integral steps in terms of really bringing co-creation to life. One of the discussions that we had at Harvard Business School yesterday was, can co-creation exist without purpose? And can purpose exist without co-creation? And so that was some of the tension that we were discussing. And I think these are some of the ideas that I discuss in the book.
I love it. So what were some of the tensions that you discussed? Because I love when there's discussion like that, because it means it's alive, as opposed to, oh, here's the definition, here's what it is. But when you're debating or discussing the tensions, it means it's alive and real. So tell us, what were some of the tensions that people saw yesterday?
I think one of the most interesting pieces was the idea of reputational risk and relinquishing control. And across industry, there were different voices or perspectives in the room that were coming to life in terms of questioning, what does that look like in practicality? How do you create a safe environment for your consumers? What does it really mean to give them a place at the table? And those were opportunities that I used to talk about things that PacSun has done, such as launching our PacSun Community Hub, which has an AI backbone and brings the community into the center of not only the creation of marketing or the open creator economy or opportunities to co-create and fuel the creator, leading the way in terms of commerce and agentic commerce, but also things that we've done, such as the Youth Advisory Council, which gives 14 young people aged 13 to 26 a real seat at the table to advise both myself, the leadership team, our board, in terms of a range of opportunities, but inclusive of strategy, technology, innovation, not just weighing in on kind of what would be expected from a focus group, which might be product or merchandising or marketing.
You've been there 20 years at the company?
Yes, I'm just going on 2 decades.
Wow. So you've been through a lot of operational, I'm sure, roles, and then, of course, the bankruptcy and the restructuring. That was 10 years ago, I believe.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so that's quite an experience. So what was your personal journey from being an operator towards becoming a transformational leader and taking a very, very challenging environment that the retail sector, as you well know, has been really buffeted by so many things, technology and Amazon and all the rest of it. So what was your journey towards transformational leadership? Like what were some of the factors that played into that and becoming the kind of leader that you are becoming?
Yeah, I would say one really important value for me is listening. And I think having the opportunity to observe and listen the first 10 years in watching PacSun as a retailer go through some very challenging times and experience a range of different leadership styles, there was a real opportunity for me to internalize what was happening, create moments for reflection, and have an opportunity to really change the way that we needed to operate to be successful. And I think that's no different than how we view the customer and customer centricity today. Social listening is an incredible tool, but it just stays at the surface. And it really requires you to do a different level of listening, feedback loop listening, going all the way to your store associates, the field, brand ambassadors, looking at all different channels, whether that be Discord or Reddit, and really trying to put more focus and effort on the research of the youth and being dedicated to the real focus of putting the customer at the center of all decision making. And so for me as a leader, some pivotal moments included, one, the Harvard Business School experience, which there is a really incredible book by Bill George called The True North, which is accompanied also by a workbook. And what really was transformational for me personally in terms of understanding my true inner purpose and how that is interconnected to the purpose of the organization, which led us to do a lot of purpose work within our leadership team, amongst the organization as a whole, and a lot of listening to together redefine our purpose to what it stands for today, which is to inspire the next generation of youth and create community at the intersection of our 4 pillars. And so I would say that was the beginning of a really important piece around defining purpose, clarity of vision. The second was a moment in Austin with the two of you when I had the good fortune to be introduced to conscious capitalism, of understanding that a business can do good and be a force in the community while also driving really powerful results. And so having the ability to lead with purpose, having the conviction of meeting leaders who also share that same belief in terms of what is the responsibility of organizations and brands today, and how can we be a force for good and help transform the world when there's so much crisis and chaos happening? And I think that that was a really additional important layer. The third, Raj, was really understanding that there needed to be a change in leadership, not just a change in terms of leading with empathy and vulnerability, which are important pieces, but also in relinquishing control and understanding that in former leadership that I had observed within the company, where all of the ideas needed to flow from the top down, really creating an open feedback where listening people's perspectives, creating think tanks, creating opportunities, and allowing the community to co-create our future alongside us and redefining what community and customer looks like were additional levers that I think were really transformational in terms of my personal journey and the journey for PacSun.
And that helped me understand a little more what co-creation looks like. Is it designing products? It's not customization, right? Each person is not getting a customized product.
No, co-creation at the highest level is really an umbrella in terms of how we need to partner to build the brand differently. And so it takes into consideration all of our stakeholders, a redefinition of stakeholder centricity. It puts purpose at the very center, and it's a transformation first internally around culture and operationalizing culture as a strategy and way to move forward. And then it brings the community in, not to just create product alongside or to create marketing or social campaigns or to fuel the creator economy, but really to help redefine what the brand should be. And so I think that there's been this traditional path of brands or retailers dictating to consumers what they should want. And I think in particular, when you look at our youth audience of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they want to co-create alongside the brand. They want to be a part of the journey. And I think that that is the beginning of what will be a very important lesson and understanding for all brands and all industries going forward.
Wow. I mean, this is breakthrough thinking, Brie. I mean, breakthrough. And it's, again, not just thinking, it's the practice. And I'm sort of intrigued, like, where did this come from? Like, how and where did you first begin to experiment with this? Because I'm always fascinated where breakthrough ideas or practices originate. And this is breakthrough. This is breakthrough work. So where did it begin, and then how did it evolve? Can you look back and say, oh, here's a point where we started to shift towards this stakeholder-driven co-creation model?
Thank you for the question and appreciate the feedback. I think there isn't a singular moment or pivot in time that's easy in the roadmap or the journey that we took to get here. And this is something that I discuss in the book in great detail in terms of what were the early signs in terms of our journey, what were things that we started to experiment with, and then when did we start to really kind of catch on to the amplification of the voice of our community could be more powerful than a singular viewpoint alone. I talk about in chapter 1 of the book a viral moment with a customer, Lila Biggs, out of Nashville, Tennessee, around an experimentation that she made on TikTok on the Open Creator platform, which for those that are not familiar, the Open Creator platform is an opportunity where a consumer who has amassed 5,000 followers has the opportunity to then try to, create content and earns an affiliate commission for what they have created. And so it's not where PacSun decided to partner with and we created a contract with and we commissioned Lila to create this video. She went and purchased the jeans. She didn't even get a sample. She created this viral video in her bedroom, and the authenticity in which she created it resonated so strongly that within the first 48 hours, she had sold almost 12,000 pairs of jeans. And then fairly quickly thereafter, she had sold out all of our digital inventory, and we saw a halo effect coming into our stores looking for the viral TikTok jean. We had sold another 200,000 pairs of this particular jean. And so I think that those moments of hyper virality, of real co-creation, and understanding that empowering your consumer and your community is another opportunity or segue towards reaching audiences you might not have reached, and the power of algorithm and AI. And really, it was very intentional, the strategies leading up to that. But it didn't happen as quickly as one might anticipate. And so those are some of the topics that I wrestle with in terms of our journey in understanding what the power of co-creation could be and what started as kind of pure collaboration and how it needed to transform based off of what worked through traditional collaborations and what wasn't working anymore as the consumer groups evolved.
Well, I'm curious, in writing the book, how did it change your perception of what you'd done? Because you've done it and now you're reflecting on it and you're trying to codify it in a sense. What was that journey like in writing the book?
I think the writing process is one of the parts that I enjoyed the most. And I think it's because as a sitting operating CEO, you very rarely get the opportunity to take a true pause and be entirely reflective on what has transpired over almost 2 decades at a company. And so there's moments within a day or a week or a quarter or a hindsight within the year where you're kind of collecting and reflecting on this information. But having the opportunity to actually pause and look at how it has all amassed and come together to lead to what has been a transformative journey for our brand has been incredibly inspiring. And I think also gave the team an opportunity to view our work, our progress, our challenges, the mistakes that we made in a different lens. And I think that's one of the things that I'm most grateful for in terms of the opportunity to write this book.
Is there a tension between wanting to have a certain vision of a brand and what it stands for and so forth, which is, I suppose, a more traditional view, versus letting go of control in a way to customers, creators, etc., without losing that sense of coherence, the identity, what we stand for? I talk about things that should be timeless, and then things that should be timely, that constantly evolve. Is there a tension there? Can we lose control over the brand? People take it and make it something other than what we wanted it to be?
So I think that's an important point, Raj, but at the core, we have a clearly defined purpose, mission, and viewpoint in terms of the vision for the brand and the organization. So that part is not relinquishing control. We also have very clear values in which we operate by. That is also not up for discussion. And so I think it's less about relinquishing control and more about expanding the inputs that inform decision making while staying grounded in a very clear point of view. And these are things that we explored in the True North. And I think you cannot have co-creation without a clearly defined purpose, or you risk exactly what you just described. And so in order for a brand to succeed in the power of co-creation, there have to be very clearly defined values. Everyone internally needs to be aligned and understand. And then you have to be very thoughtful about how you bring your community in and what that looks like. I think that, of course, there is risk to the power of co-creation, but the upside and the advantages and the reward of actually building a brand that feels like their own. When we do customer intercepts, our consumers describe the brand as a brand that makes them feel safe, as a brand that makes them feel seen. And so when you listen to these brand testimonials from the customers that love us the most, there's something very emotional. And I think that that is what will stand the testament of time in terms of brand longevity and brand affinity, especially when we're confronted with such a competitive space and so much moving at such a rapid rate.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, the words that we're using lately are what we call freedom within a framework. And the values, the purpose, those are the frameworks. You know, it was interesting when we had the chairman of Patagonia, he was sort of describing the same thing. We need to be, he was using the language experimentalists, but within the framework of our values, of our purpose. Now, within that, you give people the freedom to figure that out, what makes sense, but there are boundary conditions. And what I'm really curious about is the agility that you build into the organization from that. And by that, I mean, you know, we're also talking about this idea of zero distance to the customer. And that's basically what you've started to do, right? Zero distance to our customer because they're co-creating with us. Now, having said that, the interesting piece is how do you actualize that? Okay, we've now sort of put product development or, you know, much closer to our customer. How do you organize for agility around that? What's the process of then, you know, deciding what products we will actually rally around, which we will produce, or how does that process work from input to here's the decision making we make around these products to get them to market?
Okay, so I think you bring up a really interesting point in terms of at PacSun having co-creation as a founding principle for what we're trying to achieve demands that we move at the pace of culture. And so we have had to make changes to our supply chain. We have had to create a continuous feedback loop from customers. We have had to create an operationalized method of looking at data, looking at predictive analysis, looking at consumer feedback, and ensuring that we're getting it all right so that the accuracy of our inventory, of our buys, and ultimately what we present to the customer is in lockstep with consumers that actually move at a very rapid pace. And so questions I often am confronted with is, you know, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're so dynamic, they change their mind so often, but they also give constant feedback. And so if you really lean into the feedback, if you're curious if you should buy option A or option B, you can throw it up on TikTok and have them do a quick survey. And they're willing to engage. And that's live, immediate feedback, which is why we've created the PacSun Community Hub, PS Hub, to further accelerate the opportunity to get live feedback, to take into consideration all of these inputs and ultimately rely on an incredibly talented team. And the longevity of our team is really important because they ultimately are curating and gathering all of this input and then putting together the best assortment of brands, designers, emerging designers, and presenting it in a very cohesive way.
Bree, you use the term safe space for Gen Z. Could you expand on that a little bit? What do we mean by safe space? Why do they need this to be a safe space where they buy their clothes, etc.?
So the word is not mine. The safe space quote is a derivative directly from the customer testimonials. And so one of the youth voices described PacSun as a safe space. And she went on to explain that even in terms of how our stores are oriented, in terms of there not being a specific men's and women's separation, there's fluidity in terms of the offering, and there is a feeling of belonging. We don't have a singular way that we are encouraging young people to dress. We have a range of different styles. We have a range of different brands. So if you love the fine arts and you find yourself inspired to dress and express yourself through the collaboration with the Metropolitan Museum of Art, or something from our PacSun Collective, which is a young emerging artists where we shine a spotlight on these artists and bring their life to work in product, in murals, in stores, different ways in that sense. If you're a fan of UFC or Formula One, there's something for you. And so, of course, we can't be everything to everyone, but what we want to do is welcome young people to express their individual expression through apparel, through music, through our 4 pillars: sport, fashion, the arts, and give them an opportunity to build that individual look in a way that is unique. And so, one of the things that I challenge myself and the team always is, what is the resiliency of the PacSun brand? The first important step in our journey was 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, we didn't have a single piece of product in our store that carried the PacSun brand name. Today, if you walk into a PacSun store, or you're shopping online, or you're shopping on TikTok, 50% of the product is PacSun branded. So that means their favorite pair of jeans carries the PacSun brand. Their favorite soft t-shirt, their go-to hoodie or fleece, those are all PacSun branded. So that was kind of step one in terms of creating that stickiness. And then step two was ensuring that we have an offering and a range that speaks to the things they care about. And our 4 pillars were super important because, gaming might be important as well, but we had to make a conscientious decision that these are the 4 pillars. This is what makes us unique. And so the question you could then ask is, if you disappeared tomorrow as a brand and you were faced with your brand extinction, where would the customer go? What are the options? Where could they go and shop and have that same experience? And if you're able to create something that's very unique and there isn't a clear, obvious answer for where they would go, and then 81% of our assortment is exclusive and unique to us. So the only place to find that Metropolitan Museum of Art hoodie is PacSun. It is unique and exclusive to us. The only place to find the Formula One Japan race side jacket is in PacSun. And so we've created exclusive drops that actually connect back to them with meaning. And that's another reason that we launched the partnership with Selena Gomez with our denim line, the Rare Denim Edition. Every single unit that is sold from her collection gives back to mental health and to youth advocacy. And so having opportunities and creating opportunities with intention to also give back to our community where they care. We did the PacSun Youth Report, which debuted last September in 2025. And what we learned from the report, one of many things, which was powered by global data, we spoke to 6,000 young people, Gen Alpha and Gen Z, is the number one concern that they have is around mental health over physical health and academia. And so in gathering this information, then we look to try to connect the dots and give back to them in ways that matter. So that's a bit of, how we have thought about how our purpose trickles through, why it's important, how we show up, and how we differentiate ourselves from other brands or retailers in the space.
Well, that's very, very well thought out and comprehensive. Thank you for that. I used to teach a case on Zara, and it was called fast fashion, and that is a whole category. And maybe you get asked that question, like, how does PacSun differ from what most people think of as fast fashion?
Yeah, we acknowledge that fast fashion is clearly important for many cohorts of customers. And there are customers that shop at PacSun and also in their, wardrobe shop fast fashion. But PacSun has made a conscientious effort not to be a fast fashion brand. We are not here to chase every trend. We won't jump on everything that's happening from a fashion and trend perspective. We have a California-inspired casual lifestyle brand, and we pride ourselves in continuing to go back to these 4 pillars, which have very high relevancy with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Another piece that we found in the report was that over fashion or apparel, the number one way that Gen Z expresses themselves is through music. And so we've, with intention, partnered with GovBall, with Outside Lands, with festivals and artists such as A$AP Rocky or Willow Smith to help bring music to the forefront through creative expression, through the lens of apparel. And so we're constantly looking and revisiting what are the most relevant ways to intersect with the consumer. And it really comes back to continuing to put the community first, making sure that we're really doing our due diligence of understanding how behavior is shifting, how the overall space is shifting, and how we can do our part in continuing to move forward in a way that gives back to our community as well.
That's great. And I guess Brie, I said this at the beginning. I think you're one of the most amazing CEOs in our network right now in terms of both the energy you bring to what you're doing, but also as a leader in all the different ways that you lead. And I say that with great admiration for how you show up. Now, what I'm curious about is like where did this leadership style come from? What's the story of Brie? What have been some of the big influences in your life? Now going back, not just, the Bill George True North, which is great. I mean, I love Bill George. But going back before that, what shaped Brie into being this kind of person that could lead this way?
I've always had a real curiosity for continuous learning and innovation and creativity. And so I think those are 3 things that I have really leaned into throughout my career of constantly learning, adapting to a very evolving state of retail, but also real excitement and challenges as it comes to technology and innovation and how does it get integrated. And so I think a natural propensity for curiosity, kind of an insatiable desire to continue to learn, and a real love for reading has been helpful. I also would love to acknowledge both my mother and father. My parents are both come from a focus on education, and they both dedicated large parts of their careers to teaching. And so I definitely think as a grounding part, that was very important, and the importance of listening. So I think those are important contributing factors. I think the most important thing for people to be successful leaders is to also pick a space that they're naturally very passionate about. And so for me, it's such a privilege to lead because I love the PacSun brand. I love the youth audience. I think that's, when you think about the youth, it's so inspiring. They are the future, and we're investing a lot in them. And so trying to really understand where these future generations are going and connect the dots far beyond, what we're delivering at PacSun in terms of apparel and lifestyle and understanding the influence that they're going to have in the world. I think that makes it naturally very easy to lead in a space where you're so passionate about your community and your consumer. And I find them very fascinating. And the fact that they're so fluid and dynamic makes you kind of stay on your toes. And so I think that's been incredible as well. And then, I think also understanding that you're never done with your leadership journey. So going back to school, in my 40s and applying myself and putting that investment against continuing education is really important. Constantly kind of revisiting your leadership style and your effectiveness. I work with an incredible coach, and I think that has tremendous value. And I think, having an open mind to continuing to always revisit your ability to create real influence among your team and empower other people has been something along my leadership journey that I've continued to lean into. And for me, it was quite difficult to move into the CEO role because I had always been in product. And I have a real passion and love for products. But in order to step into that role, I needed to effectively empower the leaders and the team that I have in the product facets. And fortunately, I have tremendous leaders there. And, you have to be able to step away from what perhaps might have been kind of the soft spot for you in the organization, the one that's easiest to lean into or try to give feedback, and really focus on other areas which might not be your expertise. And there's a vulnerability there to, grow and expand yourself and your knowledge to guide and lead the IT organization or the finance organization or supply chain with the same passion and tenacity that might not have been your original expertise. And so I think those have all been kind of learning curves for me along the way in my journey.
Retailers have been pretty central to our movement. We've had a lot of highly conscious companies, from Whole Foods to Wegmans to Trader Joe's to Patagonia to one of the original firms of endearment is a company in Boston called Jordan's Furniture. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
But they were by far the industry leader. Their sales per square foot were 4 times higher than the industry average, and their marketing spending was 1/6 the industry average. And that's kind of how I started that research. And one of the phrase that they're using now could apply to you. I think they say the tagline kind of captures the essence. It says, "We get you, and we got you." Okay, so we get you, we got you, right? So we understand you deeply, and we've got what it's going to take to satisfy your needs and fulfill your aspirations. And I always, being a former marketing professor, struggling with some of the ills of marketing, some of the excesses of marketing, where we often do things that are not necessarily making our customers happier or better off. We're just feeding into insecurities or other things. In what way, as we're all on this journey towards consciousness, would you say that marketing at PacSun is about not just getting people to buy more stuff, but actually making them happier and more fulfilled and have a better life?
Yeah, that's definitely at the core of what we strive to do throughout the entire organization. And I think over the last 5 years specifically, one of my most important goals and objectives was to break down the historical silos within the organization and to ensure that people felt comfortable interweaving for the greater purpose of putting the community and the customer at the heart of the decision making. And so it might seem unexpected, but we actually haven't had a head of marketing or an executive leading marketing for 5 to 10 years at PacSun, because everyone leans in to the function, because ultimately it's about bringing that real joy and happiness to the consumer to life. And perhaps sometimes the people in product or digital are most leaned in to bring that to full fruition. And so those are things that we're exploring. And as we continue to grow and expand, bringing in marketing leadership, perhaps non-traditional marketing leadership, is something that we have on our agenda. But how to integrate that into an organization that's fairly decentralized from a marketing standpoint is a real challenge that we're facing. And so I think it's also finding a leader who can coalesce into a group that's so highly driven by purpose, who really has a hyper focus on the customer and the community and wants to co-create. Because Raj, exactly what you described is the antithesis of co-creation. It's really hard to relinquish that control about what you want to tell the customer and instead build alongside them. And so that's led us to a lot of really interesting things that we've done in the marketing space in terms of experiential retail, popping up trackside at Formula One races where we typically wouldn't be, and doing build outs and surprise and delight for the consumer, or get ready with me's in the store the night before New Year's Eve, and all sorts of things that we do to actually give back to the customer, whether it's running clubs or opportunities to come and experience the Metropolitan Museum of Art in a way that they hadn't done before, but really trying to connect our 4 pillars back to our consumer and provide them with moments of joy, happiness, delight that they wouldn't otherwise experience, that then become memories for them that give a deeper brand affinity for our brand.
So this is such an amazing story, Brie. And I, one of the things we haven't even talked about is the financials. We haven't even talked about how much you've grown, how profitable you are. Um, and that's an important part of conscious capitalism. So, I mean, make the business. You've made the business case. So articulate the business case for this in terms of how you've seen PacSun grow as you've pivoted into this way of doing business. Because I think it's important for people to understand that it's a great story. It sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing, and you've had some kind of good results.
Yeah, I would say
Brag a little.
leading with purpose and intention has certainly yielded us the most desirable results and the best possible outcomes. So we're going on 12 quarters of positive comps, 9 of which are double-digit positive comps. We've moved from roughly $785 million in revenue 3 years ago to just shy of $1 billion in 2025. We went from a history of closing over 300 PacSun stores for the first time in 15 years, opening new stores domestically, opening new stores internationally, and really being on a sustainable path for growth and connection, and doing it in a way that is organic and true to showing up where the customer matters most. And so, 10% of our digital sales are done in the social commerce space. And we are looking quickly to adapt to what it means in terms of agentic shopping. And I think those will be continuous opportunities to further enable our growth. When we look at the white space for PacSun, it's really exciting. There's probably about 140 top locations where the customer is really excited and yearning for us to open up locations to have experiential retail moments in the US. If you look at the international demand for PacSun, which we can see through our digital sales, there's a lot of exciting opportunities to continue expansion on a global scale and bring what is highly coveted here to these global markets through the California lens and through an LA lifestyle. But the pillars are what are so consistent if you look at the different markets. And so sports and how that plays into global lives of youth, and music, there are these connecting points, fashion and art. And so a lot of opportunity as we look at the global scale, and then really building on the community. And I think thinking about the community on a global scale and the power of building a community and using culture as an operating system is very exciting when we look at future opportunities for the brand. So looking at the next, short term and long term, continue to see nice growth opportunities, keeping a very close focus on purpose, the intentionality of purpose, and growing purposefully as we move forward.
And Bree, you've touched on AI a couple of times, just so sort of in passing. But talk to us about how AI is playing a role now, and what you do in all the dimensions that you might be using it.
Yeah, I think AI is transformational technology that will change the way every facet of the business works. And we started 3 years ago with an 18-month roadmap in terms of how we intended to roll out AI with intention across the different areas. And of course, as prioritizations have changed, certain priorities within the business for AI have shifted and might have become more important than one before. And I would say, from a leadership standpoint, it has been our learning. Your CTIO cannot be the one leading an AI initiative. They might be a backbone, but all leaders across all functions have to be bought in. So we have an AI council of which all of our leaders sit on. We meet weekly. We revisit with learnings. Early on, 3 years ago, I had a mandate of how many hours I expected people to work with AI, kind of as a coach or a tool alongside them. Now that's obsolete because everyone is working so seamlessly in AI. But I would say there's also such rapid innovation that some of the technology you look to implement is already outdated by the time you have it in place. And so we've had also some real learnings and I would say failures in terms of our adoption. And I think having a mentality where it's okay to fail and to learn and to create progress out of that and to reinterpret what that failure might have been in terms of, hey, let's take the learnings, let's adapt and let's move forward. There's a lot of statistics out there in terms of, the actual success rates in companies of AI. And we certainly want to be in the 5%, right? So you've got to continue to learn and progress. I would say all facets and areas of our business are really leaning into AI, starting with, I think some of our highest success rates have been organization of our stores and our field employees, labor, hours, tasks, our supply chain, planning and allocation, pricing opportunities and analytics around those different strategies. Where I would say we've had a more tempered approach has been in some of the creative functions. So we've been less apt to use it in some of our marketing, not because we don't have the technology available, but because we're still trying to understand how it impacts our consumer. And the most important thing is to do it in a way that also feels authentic to the consumer. So if there's voices in Gen Z and Gen Alpha that express that there's inauthenticity in campaigns that are purely generated through AI from a marketing standpoint, we've been very careful to tread lightly there. And also in creative design, we see that creates a lot of duplicity, and part of what is so important to PacSun and our product proposition is having a unique offering. And so although it would be easy to have bestsellers created through product creation modules, and there's great technology to do that, we've tended to keep our internal design teams fairly insulated for the time being. I still think there's a lot of opportunity as it comes to AI implementing into tech design, product development, sourcing, speed between factories. But those are areas that we've been, to be honest, just slower in terms of adoption and a bit more thoughtful in terms of what are the right guardrails within the organization.
So, Bree, you've had just an amazing story that you've been telling us. Now, let's take you back to Harvard Business School. You've got the class. You've got the CEOs in front of you. 3 things you want those CEOs to be thinking about. 3 takeaways. for a CEO who's looking at this going, oh my God, this is so amazing? What are those 3 takeaways for them?
The first would be curiosity. So maintaining a real curiosity around your consumer. The second would be purpose. And that sounds very simple, but I definitely think that co-creation and purpose have to go hand in hand. So one of the things I shared yesterday in class is feel free to revisit your purpose. It doesn't have to be static. It can be dynamic. The environment can change. And so the core of your purpose might stay the same, but there might be tweaks that need to be made, and revisit the purpose with your leadership team so that the purpose is also being created from within, co-created amongst your constituents, as opposed to being presented top down. So that would be the second piece. And then the third would be to have a really open mind about what the power of co-creation can mean to your brand longevity and your brand affinity. And so I think for a lot of people, they came in with a preconceived notion that co-creation means collaboration, or it is a marketing tool with your consumer. But it's actually a strategy to transform your brand and organization from the inside out, which is what is expressed in the book Co-Created that debuts May 12th. And these students got a unique opportunity to have them early under embargo. And so I'm very excited for their feedback as they dive in. And it's been trickling in and been very exciting to see how people are considering applying this feedback to disparate industries. And I think that's where the real excitement will come as this concept or strategy starts to roll out to industries that perhaps might not have considered it.
So in a way, co-creation is treating the customer as a stakeholder, not just as a customer, but they are now much more closely connected to the business and helping shape it. And you're on the board of Conscious Capitalism, for which we are grateful. And as you know, we're all on a journey. There's no limit to consciousness. And as you move PacSun along on that journey, what are some of the next milestones that you see? Are there issues? And supply chain is one of the big things that people talk about in the apparel industry, for example, or the circular economy. What happens to products at the end of the life cycle, et cetera? So what are some of the sort of growth edges in terms of consciousness for the company going forward?
Yeah, I think continuing to lean into the stakeholder centricity, but to ensure that we're really doing our due diligence with suppliers, with shareholders. I think, for PacSun, it's been easy to lean in with consumers and communities, and we are grateful. Many of our suppliers have been with us for 20 years, but, when we made this shift and change to purpose, we actually flew to Asia. And we met with the majority of our suppliers and we talked to them about just this. We showed them the conscious capitalism slide of stakeholder centricity and talked about how their voice is important. And we've been confronted together in the last 18 months with a myriad of issues that we've had to face together. And I think this partnership and thought process around them being also a part of our overall purpose has really helped us as we've navigated tariffs, as we are navigating continued supply chain disruptions. So I think one of the areas of opportunity as PacSun continues to evolve in its consciousness is how we can do that with more frequency. And what are those touch points that we need to do other than, an annual vendor summit or a purpose summit that we host? What are those moments that we can continue to bring all of the shareholders and stakeholders along on the journey? The second is there is a very unique dilemma in terms of being the most sustainable brand we can and trying to do the most we can for the earth, and also maintaining the affordability that young people demand. And those two things are kind of in direct opposition with one another. And even you see it in the results from our PacSun Youth Report, there's contradictions in terms of how Gen Z and Gen Alpha want to see themselves and want to see their purchasing behavior and then actually how they purchase. And so PacSun will always continue to strive to do everything that we can to be as sustainable as we can. But there are some limitations in terms of affordability, which then you move out of being able to reach and be more inclusive in terms of brand offering. And as there continues to be more pressure with inflation and overall challenges to economic stability, in particular as it relates to young people, you look at just the simple facts of oil prices and how that impacts the price of gas and how that impacts someone who's making minimum wage. And you think about our store employees and our brand associates needing to stay approachable and affordable from a price point is also something that is very top of mind. And doing that in the most sustainable way possible is going to be something that we continue to reckon with.
Wow. Bree, we often end these pieces with Raj's rapid fire questions. So Raj, do you want to hit her with your best rapid fire questions?
I need a new word. I don't like fire in there. I don't want,
Oh.
We'll come up with something else. But let's call it a fun, fast-paced, fun round. It's a little more personal. So what is the book that has impacted you the most? I know you mentioned True North. That's definitely a great book. But any other books that have really shaped you as a human, as a leader?
Ethan Mollick's Co-Intelligence.
Oh, yes. I read that. That's a good book. Yeah. And his Substack and just reading him on an ongoing basis, I think really is a great way to look at AI and try to understand it.
I think as we're all grappling with the impact AI is having on humans and humanity, he has such a beautiful way of talking about how human capital will continue to be very important in the AI equation. And so I found his book to be an easy, quick read and very inspiring, and also a grounding moment when you think about AI innovation go forward, and also how can you upskill your employees to bring them along on the AI journey.
What is your morning routine? What are some of the things that you do? Is it very structured? Do you have a set thing that you do? You get up at 5 every day? What do you do?
I probably wake up before 5 every day. I have small children.
Wow.
I am an early riser. I love mornings. I like the quiet of mornings. I tend to be a very introspective person. And so that first hour to myself with a cup of coffee and some quiet and peace before jumping into the busyness of the day. I also have young children, a son who is 13 and a daughter who is 11. And so if I'm home and not traveling, having that time in the morning to make breakfast with them and to have that one-on-one time is really special. Oftentimes I don't make it home for dinner. So breakfast is the meal of choice. And, I like to drop my son off at school. And so it might require him to go to the library for the first hour since he'll have to get a 7 o'clock drop off and school starts at 8. But it's nice quality time together. And grandma drops off my daughter. And so that's my morning routine.
What generation are your kids? I can't keep track with all the labels now.
My son is on the cusp of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and my daughter is Gen Alpha kind of squarely. And it's interesting, even in how they use AI or ChatGPT, my daughter uses only voice, right? And she's just completely integrated, whereas my son is still kind of typing or using voice, kind of alternating back and forth. So it's interesting having two kind of on the cusp and observing the different dynamics between them, and in particular in terms of technology.
And is there a brand other than PacSun that you really admire for culture and community and things like that may have been a benchmark in some way?
Trader Joe's, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It has been for a long time, a brand that I find not only entirely inspiring from a product offering, from a culture standpoint, from an experiential standpoint. You go in a store and it's hard to not feel joy and happiness and delight through both the people, the products, the offering, the flowers. And so that's one of my favorite brands of all time.
But they probably don't do a lot of co-creation and all of these kinds of things, right? They get fun products and create a fun environment.
I think there's different ways to view it. I think that they're creating different opportunities with different cuisines. I think they're very innovative in terms of how they bring newness from product to life. I also think the way in which they converse with consumers feels very community-centric. And so there's this consistent dialogue. They're not just there to help. They're there to create a conversation, a discussion, to give you product feedback, to ask for your product feedback, and just to ensure that you're having a good day. So I think they have co-creation well and alive in all of their stores. And I think it's a really special brand and culture and environment.
Yeah, and a shout out to one of our other board members, Doug Rao, who was president there for a long time. And Doug used to do what he called shopping trips with customers. He would just come up to a customer and say, mind if I walk around the store with you? And he would just ask, like, why did you go here? And why did you buy that? And why did you do that? And then, of course, he would pay for their groceries. But that kind of co-creation was like being, senior guy walking around, talking and understanding why people were doing what they were doing is critical. Brie, it has just been amazing to have you with us, and really, really appreciate who you are as a person as well as a leader and what you're doing. And I can't recommend enough to our readers that when the book comes out in the next few weeks, Co-Created, The Culture Strategy That Redefined PacSun by Brieane Olson, needs to be on your must-read list. Brie, thank you so much for your time and energy today.
Thank you both. I really appreciate being a part of the Conscious Capitalism community and the appointment to the board. And I am very excited to co-create together the future of what retail will look like for all of us.
Thank you, Brieane.
And thank you to our listeners today. And if you enjoyed today's podcast on whatever channel you may be listening, please hit the subscribe button or go over to Spotify and Apple and give us some feedback and a rating. We always appreciate that. Thank you to Rainbow Productions for producing today's show, and to Conscious Capitalism for being our sponsor and enabling us to do this. And we will all see you next week. Be well.